Okay, I apologize.
We're starting the recording?
Yes.
Okay. So nothing I said before mattered. I made it up as I went along. Okay. So the tomato was supposed to have, thought to have been a weed in the rows of maize. Could you tap the screen that says that it's okay for me? No, the screen. That's okay for me to participate with the, yes. Yeah, there you go. It makes each of the participants, I think, know that. Okay, so here's our tomatoes going into the pot. So tomatoes were thought to have been sort of a weed plant that grew between the stalks of corn in the southern continent. And it's now been domesticated, and so many varieties are out there. When it was introduced to Europe by the early colonizers in the southern hemisphere, there was a golden version called Pomodoro. And it's thought that there was a corruption of that word that became the words pomme d'amour, and that made it sort of associated with being a little aphrodisiac. I don't know if anybody wants to give it a try, but let me know how it turns out for you. Eating tomatoes, does it make you frisky? Okay, and our last ingredient is lima beans. Now, these are dry lima beans that I purchased earlier, and I pop them in a pot, let them start stewing, and they're fully tender. If you don't feel like cooking dry lima beans, it's perfectly fine to use the canned. And to prove that I want to make sure canned are things that are welcome to your plate, let me open a can and do a little bit of exploration. So whenever you open cans of beans, I think I talked about this in our last nutrition and cooking demo, there's always kind of a slurpy, murky liquid on top. That's the soluble fiber. And even though many recipes tell you to strain your beans and rinse them because they're cuter that way, they're really, the healthy part is in that gloppy, unappealing looking stuff. Okay, and when you eat lima beans, you're also getting crazy good protein. You're getting more soluble fiber, you're getting folic acid, you're getting lots more B vitamins. It's all good stuff. So what about that, what we call flatulence factor? And all of the, if you go online, by the way, I'm going to add my, some of these ones that I've steamed.
We have a quick question from Mary Foreman. Does the cooking of the tomatoes deplete vitamin C as it does when lemon juice is heated?
The answer is yes. Okay, so I added both canned and fresh to my gumbo. So the answer is yes. Vitamin C is a heat-sensitive nutrient, so you won't be getting the same vitamin C out of the gumbo tomatoes as you will out of a fresh salad. But the lutein in the tomato is intact, and the beta carotene is intact. Those are not affected by heat or by acidity or by, they are more sensitive to oxygen. So we breathe oxygen in our air. If you have a tomato or a cantaloupe or any nice, like a mango, high vitamin C fruit or vegetable, you should do your best to make it, seal it away from air. So that means putting a piece of plastic wrap over it or putting it in a container, because oxygen will alter the shape of the vitamin C molecule. Thank you, good question. Okay, so most of you know I'm constantly trying not to cough. So there's me putting in a little piece of menthol. Okay, so we have our first pot of gumbo boiling. Now, the next question, those of you who are experienced chefs should be thinking, I didn't see anything going there that's going to bring it to life, like some salt or pepper or some garlic or some onion or bell peppers or that trinity, that holy trinity of New Orleans cooking. So I say this is time where you can, give it your own sass. My favorite flavor blend, which I buy in the supermarket, and I'm not trying to get a coupon from Spice Class by holding this up, but it's Cajun seasoning. You can also go online and find several websites that will give you instructions on how to blend your own Cajun seasoning. So it's kind of paprika, garlic powder, onion powder, basil, bay leaf, a few more things that are, of course, not mentioned here. It says black pepper, garlic, MSG, basil, paprika, and then it says others. But when you're not ready to do that much in the way of keeping that much supply in the house, but you do want to have that extra little punch, I love this. So I'm going to sprinkle some of this in my pot. And now, I think I have what will be about a 20-minute ready to the table, nice, hot, thick, stewish kind of food for my family. But suppose you don't want to even take that much time. Let me show you what I'm going to call Gumbo 2.0. Are you ready? Time I have my pot. I'm adding 1 inch of water. There we go. While that 1 inch of water comes to a boil, before we started, I told Barbara I'm going to name this series or subtitle this series, Old Me in My Old Kitchen. So let's imagine we're going to keep it simple. We realize we have to have a lot more food on the table than we planned, or we've come home tired. Here it goes. Frozen okra. This is kind of your best buddy. Scissors are somewhere around here, but in the meantime, I'll cut them with the bag. And I'm going to do the whole thing because in the end, you can put this stew into the freezer in empty containers. Okay, frozen okra done. Second ingredient, frozen corn. So this is just, again, local supermarket corn. I don't think I'll add the entire bag because actually if you keep a little of this to the side, it makes a nice little garnish for other dishes. So I will seal this up, put it in probably reinforce it with a Ziploc bag. And we did talk already about the nutritional contribution of corn. Here we go. And we're still doing about equal parts corn and okra. Now, if you've ever gone in the grocery store, some of you might be thinking, why is she buying corn and lima beans separately? Because they're sold as a combined dish called succotash. And succotash has most likely a West African origin, or it might have an origin in one of the languages of the indigenous people of the Southeast. And the succotash, whatever the origin of the word, is a lima bean and corn blend. But I like to do the more generous amount of limas or maybe a more generous amount of corn. And that way, if I have the frozen bag, I'm good to go. So now the next ingredient is tomatoes. And if it's a winter day or the tomatoes in the supermarket are, $2.99 a pound and you're feeling a little frugal or really a lot frugal, I don't have a problem with opening up a can of tomatoes. Possibly this could go in after the other frozen vegetables have already sort of reached a point of being tender. So that's a thought, but I'm inclined to say if I'm making a rather fast meal that I want to start on a low simmer and then go take care of other things and come back to it, you're safe to throw the entire thing in. So what you're getting, I'll use my fingers, are diced tomato, very similar to what I prepared earlier with the fresh plum tomatoes. And here they go. I think we're going to be eating a lot of gumbo in this house for a while. And the final ingredient is our okra. No, we did the okra, the lima beans. So here is frozen lima beans. which are now going to go into the pot along with the frozen okra, the frozen corn, the canned tomatoes. Go, our fourth ingredient. So there, my friends, when each of these two pots has reached a 20-minute simmer, you have the five, almost all the 5 a day, the colorway: red, white, blue, green, yellow. Blue could be purple, yellow could be orange. So our yellow is corn. Yes, corn is not a vegetable or fruit. It's technically a grain. It's a grass. It's in the same family as wheat and rye and barley and oats. And it has a very similar kind of genetic history. But we've gotten accustomed to considering corn a vegetable, sort of a side dish. And therefore, the yellow in the corn, if it's yellow corn, is another source of one of the carotenoids, the orange colors, orange yellow. So that's a very protective to the linings of the body, having lots of roles in our immune system and so on. Red, white, blue. So the red is the tomato. The white in this case, well, if you had added onion, and I have planned to cut up a fresh onion, which is somewhere buried under a couple of empty bags of frozen vegetables, where it will remain until our show is over. It's okay. No, good. Okay, so that's my technical assistant. Then you would have had your white, and for blue or purple, you could also have used a purple onion. So the gumbo, and I want you to know, not only is it nutritionally beautifully balanced, if you don't want to add a source of animal protein, the corn is a grain and the lima beans is a legume, and grains and legume combine to make the same complete amino acid blend as if you had eaten chicken or fish or turkey or beef or lamb or pork or veal. So it can be vegan, it's clearly vegetarian, and if you still want to add something, anytime you have leftover chicken, leftover anything, you can drop it down in your gumbo. I've actually bought a bag of frozen shrimp, which I showed you. So I might, and I am one to be a little scrupulous about where and what the shrimp origins are. So almost all the shrimp we get are farm raised. I don't mind, I don't have an ethical issue with that. You just can't harvest everything out of the ocean, tons and tons and tons, day after day. So farm raised works. They're also inspected. It's an international industry. Whether or not some waters are being violated, that's a different issue that as a dietitian, I can't go into, but I trust that they're safe, and anyway, always cook things thoroughly. So these are frozen, cooked, farm raised, and I might, when the gumbo is just about finished, drop these down in there until they completely thaw and get good and hot, and then you have almost a real New Orleans gumbo. Let me take a minute to see if there's any questions about gumbo. How are we doing?
So you can either put it into the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself if you want to just ask the question.
And while you're doing that, I'm going to get my spoon and kind of look everything over. Well, or a ladle. Oh yeah, This is the good stuff.
Maudene, you must have explained everything completely.
Emerald, right?
Yeah. Bam. What about, okay. So we have a couple questions. What about adding chicken sausage? And second question, do you add seasoning, and what kind of rice?
Okay, so if you're putting it over rice, and it doesn't have to go over rice because it's got lots of carbohydrate in it. I'm a big proponent of brown rice for sure. Seasoning, as I mentioned earlier, and there will be a printed recipe of the gumbo. The printed recipe is using the frozen vegetables, frozen corn, frozen lima beans, frozen okra, and canned tomatoes. But you can see, you could also use whatever you have in your crisper drawer or whatever might be on special in the farmer's market right now. You can add your own garlic, your own onion, your own paprika. You can go crazy. And yes, throw in some of that sausage. I'm a little fussy about the kind of meat that I add, so I won't be putting in pork sausage, but I could see, hitting it with a little shellfish, some clams, some chicken, absolutely. And as I pointed out earlier, a Cajun seasoning is a blend that resembles what you might get if you had an authentic gumbo with some basil, some, well, my daughter just showed me, is that the real thing?
Yeah, well, not exactly. Actually, that mixture of the vegetables you can buy a can already.
Oh, yeah,
at
so,
Dollar Tree.
and not to mention, let's suppose you get really a taste for gumbo, but you say, I know what that means, Dollar Tree has canned gumbo in approximately a 10-ounce can with the peppers and okra and corn and limas and tomato, and it is pretty good. If
Okay.
you need to be, to kind of go the baby steps towards finding out if you want to make gumbo.
Okay, I have a couple questions. Oh, Shayla wants to know where to get the recipe. It was in the email that I had sent out earlier, but we can send out the recipe to you. Marcia wanted to know the name of the seasoning? Yes, though she wanted to know the name of the seasoning.
Okay, so I'm gonna tell you a joke. The Spice Class is the brand name, but truthfully, I see these.
Just the Spice Class?
Spice Class. I'll come I'm not promoting a brand, but I'm promoting Cajun. And you can find Cajun in a lot of blends. You know what else? Maybe you'll find one that says jerk seasoning. That's going to be good in here too. So something that has a little kick. I know some people that might throw in a tiny bit of vinegar. So.
Okay. Another question for Mary Foreman. Does brown rice have more nutrients than white or black rice?
So black rice, to my awareness, is white rice with some, snazzy seasonings added. I'm gonna just turn one of my flames down. There we go. Brown rice isn't super better, but it's just better. It has a bit more B vitamins and iron because it has the bran and the germ still attached. Whereas white rice has had the bran and the germ separated because that way it doesn't have that chewiness and that coarseness that most human beings for the last 500 years have not liked. But I'm fond of brown rice. Unfortunately, I'm a cheap date. I'll eat whatever you put in front of me most of the time.
Hope so. Question, would you add the Dollar Tree gumbo to a freshly prepared pot, and would it add or detract?
I would not. But I would say if you happen to have the Dollar Tree one and you want to warm it up next to it and compare the two and see if you feel like one could be helped out by the other or steal some ideas from the other. I find that if I buy something like chicken noodle soup, okay, this is totally living in a dorm with very few resources. A can of chicken noodle soup, which is like killer high in salt. I'm not even going to try to pretend that's not an issue. But then I might buy some frozen mixed vegetables and put it in the chicken noodle soup and cook them together. And then I feel like I've given the soup a little more body, a little more of a nutritional contribution. So in a way, I'm not going to be a purist and say never buy canned food or stay away from dollar store. You can still put good food in your stomach and feed a family pretty well if you're selective. Would I add it to my gumbo? No. I would put them side by side in a pot, 2 pots, and just sort of do a taste test.
Okay. Second question, would you use chorizo or andouille sausage?
I am not as savvy about the different kind of sausage textures and flavors as the person who should answer that question is. Do you have my daughter may have do you want to come in on camera?
Yeah, sure.
Careful.
Yeah.
We're a kitchen full of wires right now.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi.
Hello.
Yeah, I like chorizo, but I prefer the farmer's market sausage. I usually use the turkey sausage that I get at the farmer's market that's spicy. And then also I would add shrimp with the sausage. And I happen to have lucked out a few times at Dollar Tree and gotten that mix in a can when I was in a different apartment. And yeah, and honestly, it tastes as good as the frozen version. It's never to me gonna taste as good as the fresh. But if you're comparing it to like the frozen the supermarket,
Yeah.
it's definitely on par with that. And it just makes the base that much faster because you just pour it in and then add your meat or your
Yeah.
fish and add whatever seasonings you want. I don't usually do Cajun, but I'm a big fan. I'm not sure if is it Tajin, Tajin. I'm a big fan of like the chili lime salt at Trader Joe's or Tajin. Like that's a good one. Salt and pepper. Yeah, there's a few Trader Joe's spice mixes that I'm about. Yeah, that one.
There we go.
She will sell.
This is everything.
She will sell her soul for this. Yes. If you go in the store 5 minutes after she left, the shelf
It's
will
gone.
be empty.
I gave these out with little bows on them at my place of employment to all of my coworkers.
So that's good. Let's see. When I do the December cooking demo, I will make sausage for you from ground turkey. And if I need to bring a few more people in to verify that it really tastes good. And in my turkey sausage, again, ground turkey, I use wheat bran. Don't laugh, don't squeeze your face. Wheat bran.
It's good.
And sage and salt and pepper and diced up, very, very well minced apples. You're gonna love it. I promise that's for the December cooking demo. Now, we're not finished, okay? We talked about gumbo, and I see that we have about a half an hour left between more and more talk. So I thought there was another thing that everybody should get comfortable with, and that is making pie crust. I learned pie crust in junior high home economics. And I'm not sure how many of you out there are my generation. We all had home economics in junior high. And I thought I was like on top of it, right? So I made a deep dish blueberry pie with my homemade crust. In the deep dish blueberry pie was done in a Pyrex bowl, Pyrex baking dish. I broke the Pyrex dish trying to cut into my blueberry pie crust. Gives you an idea that I created some space age thing that probably should be on the outside of the space capsule instead of in my oven. And after that, I sort of thought I'm never going to be a pie crust maker until I discovered a Fannie Farmer pie crust recipe that I'm going to demonstrate for you now. I taught my daughter, the one who just had a beautiful face on the camera, I taught her that at about 12 years old.
Yeah.
And she's been doing it ever since. It's fine for making a quiche. It's good for a double crust pie. It's good for your sweet potato, all those good pies. So are you ready? Do you want to see an easy pie crust? Don't beg, it's so unbecoming. Okay. Now for that, I need to use a very solid surface, and my demo spot here is a little less. So I'm going to ease over to a counter. I'm going to just tip my laptop. And I've done everything I can to clear away the foolishness. I need a little more show up this side. There we go.
Perfect.
Okay. So here's how this goes. It's called a stirred crust, where I start with 2 cups of all-purpose flour. And here they go. You know, everything was all set up nicely to start. Now it's starting to look a little less. Okay. So I have a measuring cup. I have wonderful neighbors who will go to Costco and get big bags of things, or my daughter will have them delivered from, oh, that's the sugar. Look. My daughter will have them delivered from Target, and sometimes just for the fun of it, I'll go on my bike. So here is a bag of all-purpose flour, and you know the appropriate way to measure flour is not to tap the cup and make it fall in flat, but you really dip it out and then flatten it with a knife. So allow me to do that kind of off camera. And currently, most chefs are saying you don't have to sift flour anymore, but I do. You can either sift or stir to blend. So here's my second cup of flour, and this is to make a 2-crust pie. So the flour is finished. Let me put it out of the way. The next 2 ingredients in this recipe is going to be kind of funny. 1 teaspoon of sugar and 1 teaspoon of salt. So here is sugar. Okay, 1 teaspoon. And here is the salt. 1 teaspoon. So the sugar is going to help the pie crust to brown, and the salt will be, and as well the sugar and the salt will affect the kind of tenderness of the crust. So I know you can't see me, but I'm still staring at you. I'm sifting these together to blend. Okay, here come the next 3 ingredients. They are 2 ingredients. Some sort of salad oil, and I use canola oil, and milk. So we don't have currently cow's milk in the house, so I'm going to use almond milk. And the ratio is 1/2 of a cup of oil to 1/4 of a cup of milk. Then I want to blend that until they look kind of homogeneous. Again, my friends go to Costco and they get these little bottles of oil, which means you have to measure everything with 2 hands. Okay, and very much you're about measuring. This is not your grandma's way of saying, oh, it's a little pinch of that and pinch of this. Okay, let me just make sure I didn't go too far. A tiny bit, but I'll put a tiny bit back. Okay, and to this I'm going to add 1/4 of a cup of milk. And I don't have to put that in a separate cup. I'm just going to raise this to the 3/4 level. It might have gone a tiny bit over, but like many things, you can add a little flour if it's too wet, add a little liquid if it's too dry. And I have this small kind of whisk, and I'm going to mix this, I hope you can see, until the milk and the oil are blended. And then when it's called a stirred dough, it's because I'm going to take out a fork. I know, how does that happen? How do you use the word stir and the word fork in the same sentence? I'm going to stir it with a fork. So what are the nutritional properties of this pie crust? Well, for one, most pie crusts are made with very saturated fat. It's either butter, sometimes lard, or a blend of those with a stick margarine. And those are not necessarily killers. I mean, you're not going to die by the weekend. But saturated fat is well established to be something that might contribute to elevating your cholesterol. So what you should see here is a consistency which might kind of remind you of Play-Doh. And when you reach in, it's going to be kind of moist, kind of smushy. I'll come a little closer. And you should think, that is never going to roll out. You're going to have a big mess on your hands, unless you do step 2, which is the magic. First, I'm going to form these into 2 balls. And again, if it seems a little dry, you can always put a little more liquid in it. And if it seems too wet, you can just knock a little more flour. So as you see, I've kind of divided it into 2. And the next thing I'll do is take out a sheet of waxed paper and put the waxed paper down on my surface that I'll be rolling out the dough. Here's a little tip. I don't have a cutting board or a butcher block, so I use one of these little shear things underneath my cutting board to kind of keep it from sliding around, right? And when you begin your first part of the pie crust rolling, you want to put a tiny bit of moisture on your rolling surface so that the wax paper doesn't slide. So here, it's a little fluid, and I'm really just doing just that, smacking it a little bit. And you may say, oh, it's going to be a mess. It's going to turn into a big wet sheet of wax paper. Well, I could, but you roll another. Okay. First layer. Would it be easier if I put the camera a little closer?
I think we can see you. All right. Is everybody okay with what they can see?
Okay,
Okay.
good. So step 2. Here's my first ball, ball of dough. I was gonna say dough of ball. Okay. And you're gonna give it a little bit of a smash to kind of get the center ready. And now we're gonna put another sheet of wax paper on top and roll it out. When you roll it out, it just sort of makes sense that you would start with rolling from an edge and kind of keeping the edges approximately the same thickness. And sometimes your wax paper might scrunch up. Life goes on. Okay. You can actually redo it. And here I hope you can see I can tilt it a little. I'm getting the wax, you're trying to roll this out into as close to a circle as humanly possible. On America's Test Kitchen, they get circles. I don't know how they do it. I think they must, I think they cheat. Okay. So we're making a big circle. And as you see, I'm rolling it. The rolling pin isn't getting damp. This very sticky dough is not making a problem. And I'm getting it to being in a circle. Now, next thing I'll do is peel off the top sheet of paper. I hope you can see this is just a little bit of time, but it's really not a lot of effort. Put it across the pie plate. Here's my pie plate. Okay. I love to hit the thrift shops. I have far too many. If you want one, come to my door. So I peeled off the top layer. I'm going to set this someplace where I can come back for it. Now I take the bottom layer, like so, drape it over the pie plate. And yeah, you can actually stop and answer the phone and come back and do it again. And when I drape it over the pie plate, most of the time it's going to give you a perfect release. And if it doesn't, sometimes you can stick it in the refrigerator for a minute, stuck to the wax paper, but most of the time it's going to be fine. So what you can see here is that it looks a little wetty. You can always take some piece over here and patch it over here because whatever you're cooking in there is going to be covering the pie. And I think I got it good enough for now because I'll do a second cover, which will second circle, which will be the top. So there's no way I would do this without having a plan. So I have already cut up some apples and I'm going to season them, add them to the pie, and then make the top and shove them in the oven so that my family that's helped me to get all of this together gets a treat out of it. I don't know about you, but I always find that a little lemon juice makes every pie a bit better. So I have a couple of lemon squeezers, but I'm going to use a strainer and she thought she was going to squeeze that lemon. Okay. One of the things many recipes also ask you to do is to put lemon juice on your apples so they don't turn brown. I don't get the big deal. They're going to turn brown. So what? They're going to get baked. When you eat them, do you interview your apples? Why are you brown? Interviewing your apple is, why isn't this piece bigger? Okay, so this is one of those devices that it's also kind of a fun thing. Especially if you don't have the hand strength to squeeze a big, ginormous. There we go. I'm good. So here comes my juice, keeping the seeds from going in. Okay. And I'm now going to use the rasp to make some rasp. Is it nearby? Was nearby. Yes. To make some, there we go. And the last thing I'll do is add sugar, cinnamon, a little nutmeg, and then roll out the other pie lid, put it together, and it's ready to go into the oven right about when our session will conclude. So here comes the sugar cinnamon, nutmeg. Is anyone here very careful about measuring their cinnamon? I am reasonably careful. I also should ask, is anyone here very particular about the kind of cinnamon they buy? Because there's so many varieties. And I would say, no, I'm kind of a cheap date when it comes to cinnamon too. And, but I do use half as much nutmeg as cinnamon, because somehow the nutmeg, that could actually kind of overwhelm it. So, for some reason, my nutmeg is in little clumps. There we go. I'm going to now add sugar. The question is how much? I'm gonna do like maybe 3/4 of a cup of sugar. Here's the half cup. And the sugar is in a big canister. Where'd the big sugar canister go? This was, no, it's over here. That's the flour. Okay, here it is. The big canister is sitting right next to the pot where the gumbo is. Adding about 3/4 of a cup. This is a half of a cup, so I'm going to add this and a little bit more. And there we go. That's the second amount. And then this is ready to go into the pie dish, and I will roll out the second. Wouldn't hurt to sort of mix it up. And probably the other ingredient that is important in order for your pie to have a nice thickness is to add 1/4 of a cup of flour. So since this is the half of a cup, I'm going to add a half of this. And there we go. Because as you know, the apples will give off a lot of fluid. So here goes my apples. There's my cinnamon, there's my nutmeg. I can see the sugar, I can hear the sugar, and we saw lemon juice and lemon rind go in. I see a hair from the shucking of the corn. How did that get way over here? Okay, what you're looking at now is a pie about to get into the oven. The final thing is to make the second circle of dough, and I'll prick the edges, prick the center, put it in. Are you ready for part 2? Here it goes. Keeping something handy with soapy water. Because sometimes your surface gets uninvited something or other. So I'm going to give it a little more dampness. I use the jar to make that piece of wax paper stick. Okay, here's the one that's on the bottom. Here comes the second ball of dough. I'm mashing it down into a pretty smallish circle so that I can use the rolling pin to complete the roll. And here it goes. So this might be a good time, Barbara, if you want to see if there's any questions or anybody who wants to compare their favorite apple pie recipe to what I've got going here. What do you think? I can put this back so that perhaps you're speaking to not a headless human. Okay. A little more head. Okay, ready. Any questions about making?
There we go. We can see you. Yes. Okay. Well, Ruth says fab. Oh, can you hear me?
My audio cracked for a moment. As
Oh,
might
can you hear me now?
Yes, and I took a fresh sheet of wax paper because you just don't want any drama when you're trying to peel it off. And sometimes the sheet of wax paper that you had to ball up isn't really a big deal. So the question?
Yes, somebody asked, what else can you add? Walnuts, cranberries?
Yes, I have cranberries in the freezer from last year. And my daughter says, you haven't had an apple pie until you've added dried cherries. In the Family Farmer cookbook where the recipe for the stirred pastry comes from, there's also one that uses cranberries and raisins and the, turning off all my pots, see my pots. I think my gumbos are
Okay,
done.
well, while you,
And yes, yeah, walnuts, I put a walnut more of an apple crisp than an apple pie. But if you wanted to make a pecan pie, this is a perfect bottom crust. If you want to make a quiche, it's a perfect bottom crust. Yeah, questions, keep them coming.
oh, well, Marcia says, thank you for making it look so easy. I wish I knew you when I was younger and still baking.
You didn't know me when I broke the Pyrex dish. I had to explain that to my mother when she came home from work. Okay, I think I'm ready to put this one over the pie that's the ingredients. So some people also add a little dot of butter to their pie. It's supposed to be able to make kind of a better, a more richer liquid filling for the pie to bake in. Sometimes I forget, sometimes I don't have butter. Today I have butter. She said with confidence. At least I see the onion now.
Okay, we have a question. Is there any way to make a pecan pie, which I love, but without all the corn syrup?
Yes, in fact, the AARP website has it, that's cream cheese. The AARP website, would you guys pretend I put butter in here and be friends?
Yes, we won't tell.
We won't tell. Okay, top sheet goes off, bottom sheet comes up. And we're going to lay it across the top of the pie. Bam, easy as well. Oh, and here comes some butter. The AARP has a vegan pecan pie recipe on their monthly or weekly newsletter that I just decided I'm not going to delete that newsletter. I want to wait until I can read that recipe. So I'm pretty sure it uses something like brown sugar or rice syrup, or maybe agave. Okay, I'm popping this in and it's kind of messing with the beauty of my finished crust, but here we go. Peeling off. That's because I tried to pull it up to put the butter after I'd already set it down. But we're not going for perfection, right? We're going for keeping it simple. It's gonna taste good coming out of the oven. Half the time when we eat pie after dinner, we're so stuffed. Like our eyes are blurry. Okay, now you can do all the crimping and making this kind of cute if you'd like. This lends itself to the same amount of crimping and making the cute. I'm just tucking it in now because one of the things that always happens, in fact, it's a good sign to tell you that your pie is almost finished. It starts to bubble, and then the bubble gets on the floor of your oven, and neighbors next door say, "Is something burning?" So I want to seal it in as much as possible. Now, if you want to make it cute, you can do the thing that chefs have been doing for a while, which is to use your index finger and your thumb and kind of sit that up. Some people braid it, some people twist it, depending on how much time you want to give it. That's all about it. Sometimes I'll make a pie with no added sugar, and I will decorate that pie with a little apple on top from some leftover dough. So here's where we would put in our vent holes, and our pie is ready to go in the oven. I hope you've learned some good things about this. This pie crust, remember, is made with a highly monounsaturated fat because it's canola oil. It is made with white refined flour. I've tried it with whole wheat flour. You gotta really want to eat it. It's just not the same. But you could do a half and half and see how, you know, you feel like it sort of meets your standards. And these are apples that were mostly bruised, so I had to cut around the bruises, but I hate to see any really good food, you know, go into a compost if it's still good for humans. And I'm happy to take any more questions.
Okay, nope, so far so good.
Okay. Who's coming by for pie later?
I am.
I I was shocked to
I
see
love apple pie.
all of my information is online. There's no privacy. So knock on the door. I can't act.
I watched my mother fix apple pie and all those things that you do, and I still haven't got. I still can't get how to make that dough. My father showed me how to do it. My mother showed me how to do it. My grandmother, everybody showed me. I still can't get it.
The crust.
Yes.
This was recorded, so maybe
Yes.
give it another shot.
Oh, okay.
key part is that you're stirring your milk and your oil together until they look all.
Yes,
Oh, okay.
that's
Then
important.
don't worry about the texture feeling gummy and mushy. That's actually easy enough because it's between the two sheets of wax paper.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a couple other questions. Do you ever bake it on a cookie sheet to prevent leaks?
Always, if I remember, or I just get a piece of recyclable
Foil.
oil.
and put it on the rack. Yeah.
Okay. And how many pounds of apples, Ruth is asking, did you
So
use?
that's a good one. Every recipe calls for 4 large apples. I don't know what a large apple is. So here's what I've done. This is an old Tupperware, I think.
Yeah, it looks like it.
Looks like one, right?
Mhm.
And I fill it. So that looks like 8 cups. Because as I say, when I make an apple pie, I don't buy the cute premium apples from the store. I buy the ones that are bruised and half rotten. So if I buy 4 pounds of apples, I may have to end up with only 2 pounds of edible part. So I do need something else to give me an appropriate volume. And this is what I use, and it comes up to here. So if you want to measure yours with 8 cups, and you may have another bowl, like the bowl I was using to fill the after cutting the corn, you can find that spot on your favorite bowl. Maybe there's a nick or a flower or something, or put a little magic marker. And that gives you the amount. This is also a slightly smaller pie plate than I might normally use. But then if you're going to use a much bigger pie plate, you can maybe add another half a cup of flour and a pinch more milk and a couple of tablespoons more of oil.
Okay.
And try it.
All right. Well, we just have a comment here. It's fantastic sessions. Thank you. We'll attend more of your classes. That's from Sandra. We have, let's see, thank you. Very inspiring. And Susan, bake how long and what temp? And Sheila wants to know if you use Granny Smith.
Okay. So that's another one.
Oh, you're going in and out. We'll give you a second. Oh, Maudene, you with us?
And,
She froze.
okay.
Yeah, she froze.
Okay, I think we
Most of
did.
us are. My wife is being, okay.
There you go.
I'll keep going.
Okay, so let's start again. How long do you bake it and what temp? And do you have a Granny Smith?
Okay, so piece of menthol. So I don't buy Granny Smith apples. Okay, I go to the Garden Gourmet on Broadway, and at the far left of the outdoor display, they have beat up apples in bags for 99 cents. And I find beat up apples. So they could be Granny Smiths, they could be, you name the variety, I've tried them all. And by the time you got the cinnamon and nutmeg, sometimes they're mushy, sometimes there's a bite, but no one has ever complained. Okay. And then most recipes say, put it in the oven at like 400 degrees for 15 minutes and then turn the oven down to 325. Okay, 2 things that I want to enter here that are variables. I always use a glass pie plate. Unless I'm giving it away, then I use metal. And when you use glass, you can actually cook it about 25 to 50 degrees lower. So I always will have my pie cooked
Right.
300 to 325. I don't start with that 400 degree or 425 degree for one main reason. I have an old stove. This stove was installed in this house in 1950. Should I repeat that? So 1 year
No, you
younger,
don't have to repeat that.
it's 1 year younger than me.
50 years.
If I buy another stove, it will never last as long. It's got some, it has some little awkward moments, but so I try to make sure that my temperature is within range of whatever it is. So I don't start too high because I think too high could be like crazy high. So I think if I start at 325, 350 and turn it down to 325, I'm good on this stove. Old me in my old kitchen.
No, that's it. You know, I've cooked like that all my life with that type of temperature, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. So,
And I was married 63 years, so.
oh, you're just a rookie. Yeah. I have my technical assistant wants to make a comment. Come around.
I was just gonna say, when I've used it to make pies, I follow her instructions. Like if it's something sweet, like a fruit, if you're making something, I'm sorry, come in here. If you're making something like a chicken pot pie or like a beef pot pie or something to that effect, then you might actually want to cook it with a little bit more butter on the outside because you're gonna leave it longer. And I found that it actually makes it work a lot better.
Okay.
Good idea.
Oh, thank you.
How
Thanks.
long you cook it?
Thank you,
Yeah.
thank you. I'm hungry. I'm going to eat.
They're at 6 o'clock, 7, and I don't want to, I could talk all night, but I have to do something about the hurricane that hit my kitchen in the last hour while I moved everything out of the way and then now I have to bring it back.
Yeah,
Any
but at least you don't have to worry about dinner.
I just have one more fun thing. Over my right shoulder, you'll see food dehydrators, which I also bought at the thrift shop on 234th Street. And with those same beat up apples. There are. With the same beat up apples, I make dried apples. And they take 24 hours. They're like no time at all. You eat them in 2 minutes, but I think if anyone feels like cluttering their kitchen with additional appliances that you may only use 5 times a year, this would be a fun one. And if you say, where do I find one? Or you go online and they're $75, I'll hook you up.
Yeah, talk to my daughter because she loves all those
$4.99 is the
gadgets.
top I'll pay.
She loves all those gadgets.
So how are we doing?
Thank you. I appreciate that. Listen, I mean, with the pie, with the dough, the pie dough and whatnot. Thank you.
Excellent.
That's something good for me to I remember all the ingredients, so I won't forget it.
Cool.
And I wrote it down just in case I do forget it.
And if you go online and just go apple pie recipe, you'll see 325. And
Oh yes, there's a lot of them out there.
Yeah, like you can't
Mhm.
go wrong.
No.
Can we see your
Thank you again.
gumbo?
Oh, do you want, can you show everybody your gumbo?
Oh, yes. I'll put it in a glass bowl.
Perfect.
As you see, I started to put everything on top of my workspace again. And it has not had the shrimp added.
What's total baking time on the pie? Susan is asking.
Oh, 50 minutes, 40 minutes. Yeah. Again, that may vary with the temperature of your oven and whether or not you see too much brownness around the rim of the crust. Okay, so this is a bowl, which is not clean, but it's the one that I was adding the tomatoes and such to. So let's take out the convenience one first. Oh, okay. There it is. This is with the frozen vegetables, and it needs a little stir, and then I'll scoop it into the. Okay. Remember, I said this is the one that does not have the skin removed from the tomato. How are we looking? Can you see anything? I'll bring it closer to the camera. This is the convenience one. That's right. Yes, this is the canned tomatoes. Thank you for that. I'm so excited to share it. Okay. How's it looking?
Looking good.
I almost poured the juice.
Yeah, that looks good.
Look
Wow.
good.
Now,
Really
we'll look
good.
at the one that used all the fresh ingredients. And pardon me, because I only have one glass bowl, I'm gonna pour this back. She said, without getting a 3rd-degree burn. How is it that something boiling made the glass bowl hot? What kind of science is that? Okay, we're gonna recycle the bowl. Here comes the other. Thank you for reminding me to share it with you. Okay. Not to worry. No animals were harmed in the falling of that pot. Okay, now I'm going to bring it over to the camera. This is the one made with fresh okra, fresh tomatoes, freshly cooked lima beans. Hey Maya, can you tilt the?
It looks nice.
How's it look?
That looks good.
Nice.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes.
It's got more liquid in it than I want you to see, and that keeps the other, but I assure you, the taste test is gonna be awesome.
Wow. Looks good.
Yeah, and you saw simple, right?
Yes.
Mhm.
Very
And
good.
when I put it back in the pot, I have a feeling the shrimp will be visiting. Okay. So I loved having you guys there.
Thank you so much for
Thank
that.
you.
Okay. Barbara, stay tuned, whatever you need from me next.
Okay, I'll stay on and thank you everybody for joining us. We will be
Thank you.
back.
Great.
Cook for Maudene in November and then cook it for a nutrition program and on holiday cooking and how to make it healthy and cut out some sugar without losing the flavor. And then in
That'd be great.
December, Maudene will let us know what we're doing for another cooking program.
Okay, great.
Okay.
All right. All right. Take
All
care.
right, thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right, good night.